All right, welcome everyone, and thanks for joining this webinar, which is part of SEM University. I am Dustin Briles, SEM's Director of Technology, and in this webinar, we'll be going over the new Cornerstone portfolios, which are our biblically responsible investment models. If you haven't been part of one of these before, I just want to let you know that we do have Q&A available in here. You should see it pop up as soon as you join. Go ahead and submit your questions anytime, and we will do a little Q&A segment at the end. Also want to let you know that you can, even though this is a live webinar, you can actually pause, rewind, and then fast forward to any point in the webinar, sort of like a live YouTube thing if you've been a part of that. So with all that being said, I will now hand it over to Jeff.
Thank you, Dustin, and thank you everybody for joining us. I know everybody has a lot going on right now. I know I've been bombarded by emails for special webinars, and we did a lot of discussion internally of whether we should delay this or not. We had planned on launching these mid-March from the beginning of the year, and we wanted to get through all the busyness of tax season and everything else. And what we really talked about is it's important at this time to focus on something positive, focus on moving forward, because no matter what crisis is thrown at us, SEM's been around for over 28 years, and we know we'll get through this. And the critical thing to do is to be able to offer something positive to your clients. And I think this is something that everybody we've talked to about it over the last several months has gotten quite excited about this offering. And at SEM, as most of you know, we're all about continuous improvement. And part of that is listening to our advisors and clients all across the country. And over the past several years, we've heard a lot of requests for investments that look beyond just maximizing returns. And so, of course, as you'd expect from SEM, we're not just going to offer something that we don't truly believe in or something where the numbers don't make sense. Now, we don't have time today to go into my personal testimony. I've been a Christian for 19 years now, and one of the things Brandy and I have talked about and literally prayed about at least every week, if not every day, at times like this, is help us find ways where we can truly make a difference with our company and our relationships. And it's really interesting how God answers prayers, and I'd love to chat with each of you about how he answered this one with me. But in the interest of time and to keep this with our allotted 30 minutes, I'll move on and just encourage you to reach out to me, and I'd love to have a conversation with you about my experience and how we came to this. So, of course, at SEM, we've studied demographic data for since I started with Rick. That's always been a passion of mine, and I've considered myself an amateur demographer and really have become an expert on the social cycle. And one of the things that is interesting is my life experience. Brandy and I are both Gen Xers, which is the forgotten generation or the ignored generation. And we started our family extremely young. And so we have 6 kids. 4 of our kids, the oldest ones, are all millennials. 2 of them are already married. And so obviously we've had a lot of experience with millennials. And through the years, we've gotten to know, of course, through our friendships with other people, both Gen X and millennials. And one of the things that's prevalent in both is they want to do more than just get rich. They've seen the baby boom generation and older generations focus on material things. And surveys continue to show that both millennials and Gen Xers look beyond just how much money you make, but they look at things that, how can I make an impact? And one of the critical things to understand as advisors is the projections right now within the next 10 years, those 2 generations are going to control 47% of the wealth in our country. And so this is something that means we're going to have to shift the way that we're managing money, the way we interact with our clients is going to have to change and adapt to Gen X and the millennials right after that. Most of the time when you hear about socially responsible investing, or what's called ESG investments has kind of been the new acronym that's taken hold lately, you tend to think of a focus on environmental issues and other social issues. And what's interesting is biblically responsible investing is part of this category. So when you talk ESG or socially responsible, that encompasses biblically responsible investing. And From where we're at SEM, we have a lot of advisors who are Christians, and we also have a large number of clients who are Christians. Where we're at here in Virginia, obviously that's kind of the hotbed of a lot of the more evangelical Christian movement. So since we've moved here several years ago, we've had a lot of requests from people to do more with our investments. And we wanted to focus beyond just the socially responsible space and really make it a niche inside this niche. And that's where biblically responsible investing comes in. Our industry loves acronyms, and at SEM we love acronyms because we're founded by engineers and have a lot of engineers running around, and we all love to use acronyms. And we have a whole bunch of those floating around, and I put some of those up there on the screen. Essentially, and this isn't a perfect way to describe it, but you can think of ESG, which is environmental, social, and governance focus, to encompass SRI, FBI, which is faith-based investing, impact investing, sustainable investing. Basically, it encompasses all of those. But what I found interesting is when you look at what the typical ESG or SRI portfolio looks at, is they want to avoid things like tobacco, gambling, and pornography. They also want to focus on embracing companies and industries that look out for the environment, corporate governments, how they take care of their community. But when we start to look at BRI, we see that it too encompasses all of those things. BRI wants to avoid those industries. They want to embrace those other industries. And so that becomes important because we're not really that different when we focus on BRI than the overall ESG or SRI space. What really comes in, the key is you're going to see a lot more focus on embracing LGBT issues with mainstream ESG and SRI. And then what you'll see on the BRI side is they really want to eliminate and avoid abortion-related products and services. But that's it. So if you look at our BRI focus, we're going to cover almost all of the mainstream ESG and SRI things that are part of that. I titled this slide, "Why Are We So Afraid?" And I'm going to call myself out on this one. Is I know I've been very guilty of saying, I'm going to keep my faith separate from my business. I felt it wasn't my place to preach to people. When people were coming to me to manage money, it's not my place to preach. I just figured, well, they'll know I'm a Christian. I'll mention I go to church. They'll know some of those things, but I really wasn't out there and more focused on marrying my faith with our business. And from talking to our advisors so far about these portfolios, is I know a lot of you have felt the same. You've shared that with me. But then I've also admired, there's many of you out there that are advisors of SEM that are very forward with their faith, going as far as praying in their client meetings. And the one thing that I want to do is definitely have something where our Christian advisors have Christian managed portfolios that they can proudly offer to their clients. But what's interesting is if you look at the survey, the disconnect has been most Christians want a faith-based focus, yet almost all of them have said their advisors have not spoken to them about this. So most advisors in our industry have done what I've done and try to separate their faith from their business relationship. And we don't need to do that anymore. And that's one of the primary purposes of having the Cornerstone portfolios in our lineup now. So, as you'd expect from SEM, jumping into how these things are managed, is we're not going to just do a buy and hold strategy. That would be something we don't believe in buy and hold. It's just something that we've never done, and we're not going to sacrifice that core belief just to offer a new product. That's not what we're about at SEM. I put up there on the screen Proverbs 27:12, and this is really the verse that was key to the Cornerstone models. It was actually the working name of these models as we developed them was the 2712 portfolios. And it came to that because I had read this verse the very morning that we started looking into this, and it really hit home to me. And the way I look at it is, if we have the tools, the experience, and the capability to adjust our portfolios, we should use them. it's just part of being a good steward of our money. And that's what I've said from the beginning whenever I've talked to a Christian is, just blindly buying something and just not ever doing anything about it, not actively working it, is something that I think is not a good use of your money, especially if you have the tools like we do at SEM to make adjustments. And like it says in Proverbs, take refuge when you see danger, and the ones who are just buying and holding, they're going to pay a penalty. And as we know from our behavioral approach, oftentimes if somebody loses more money than they're comfortable with, they're going to abandon the strategy. And that's something we absolutely do not want happening to our clients here at SEM. But alas, we did some market surveys and asked advisors and potential clients about it, and 2712 didn't really relate to them. It turns out that week for the band, we were working on a song called Cornerstone. A lot of you may have heard that. So as I was playing that song, getting ready for the service that week, I thought, well, what if we just called it Cornerstone? And obviously that, to me, makes much more sense. We put it out there, and overwhelmingly, the people on social media chose Cornerstone. And so that's how we came up with the name. But definitely Proverbs 27:12 is something that is important to the management of these funds. And if you look at it, Cornerstone is built on the same premise as our AmeriGuard models. We want to stay invested as long as possible and only reduce the equity exposure if the longer term trend shifts lower. And then we want to stay at our reduced equity exposure until it shifts higher. And this model's been used in real time since early 2000, and it's only had 8 shifts since it's been implemented. So it's something that allows you to stay invested. It keeps you in a more tax efficient strategy, but it does have kind of that trigger to pull you out when things appear to be getting to a really negative market until there's a new trend in place. And so that's the same thing that overlays on AmeriGuard. It's the same model that will be used to dictate the asset allocation with Cornerstone as well. And then, like AmeriGuard, it's not going to be just a static allocation. We're always looking to allocate to the sectors that are strongest. For instance, small cap and international stocks have been dramatically underperforming large caps. Thankfully, at the beginning of the year, our allocation model said, move everything to large cap stocks. And large cap stocks have held up much better during the 2020 sell-off thus far to give us better performance than we had if we had just had a broad-based portfolio. And so unlike a strategic allocation, we're not just going to buy a broad mixture of asset classes. We're going to go through that. And there will be a time where small caps and international will be outperforming. And just like AmeriGuard, Cornerstone has the ability to overweight those asset classes. But really what's key with Cornerstone is our due diligence and our BRI screening, because not all BRI funds or faith-based funds are created equally. And right now there's over 70 current faith-based funds out there. And let me tell you, as I talk to the people out there, there's way different definitions of what it means. And so having us filter through those for your clients is something that I think is critical. It also means we're not stuck with just one fund family. We can be rotating around. As new funds come up, we can take a look and do our own due diligence on there. But what's really key, I put up on the screen some of the things that we look at when we talk to the faith-based funds that we're using. And there's 3 tenets that they will look at when they're screening the stocks that they own. They look to avoid certain sin stocks we talked about earlier, but then they also look to embrace and engage. And then I think the real important part that gets me really excited about this offering is the impact side. Is what is the vision of the underlying fund company? What are they doing with their money? How are they impacting God's kingdom? And that's something we've never been able to do with our investments until now. Up on the screen now, you'll see our portfolio lineup. Initially, we sought only to have models that were in the balanced to max space, basically mirroring what we were doing with AmeriGuard. But as we talked to advisors and clients, they wanted a full turnkey biblically responsible investment lineup. So we went to work, and we were actually pleased to find that there are several options in the high yield bond space, which allows us now to overlay the same model we use for tactical bond on biblically responsible funds. And then on the income side, just like dynamic income, there's a broad range of income investments. This goes way beyond bonds, dividend paying stocks, preferred stocks, real estate investment trusts, all with a biblically focused mandate are available now in that. So it's really exciting that we have Cornerstone Bond, Cornerstone Income, and then balanced growth and max, which is always invested in stocks. It'll just rotate what asset classes it goes in. And you could see how it lays out clear across the risk bucket. We can then blend different Cornerstone models to get you to the risk level that you want to be, or to make it match whatever bucket that the client's money needs to be invested in. But I think the real key here is this goes way beyond just trying to make the most money possible. Obviously, we're very happy with the results, but the intangible, for this is what the partners that we're using in the portfolio are doing with both the investments we place with them, as well as the fees that we're paying them for those investments. And I put Romans 12:9 up on the screen because I think this is really important to understand. It's what we're doing with the BRI, the abhor what is evil. Now that's the avoid side. That's something that everybody understands, and that's what I thought BRI was all about, and why I didn't get real excited about it. Yes, it's important to not be profiting from some of those things, like abortion products that God clearly defines as a sin. But the clinging to what is good is really what matters. The question is, what do you want to do with your investments? How do you want your clients' investments to make an impact for God's kingdom? And these partners that we've chosen, are important. One of the things I found when I was doing the research is a very long list of corporations who donate to the Center for American Progress. Now that, if you're unfamiliar with them, they're one of the biggest supporters of pro-abortion lobbying efforts. And when you go through this list, you see hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars donated by the likes of Vanguard, Fidelity, Bank of America, JP Morgan. They were all on the list. So when you're paying fees to a Vanguard or a Fidelity, your fees are then being turned around and used, supporting pro-abortion legislation. And that's something that really, hit home to me, because that's one area where the Bible is very clear that God is against it. And if there's a way to not pay fees to those fund families, and in turn pay fees to families who are trying to make a difference for God, that's something that we want to do. Now, obviously, you can't avoid doing business with every company who doesn't align with our Christian values, because there wouldn't be very many places where we could buy things or do anything. So it really comes down to looking at, are we doing the best possible we can with the tools we have with our money? And that's what the Cornerstone models are trying to do. And I think what excites me most, for those of you that have listened to me over the years when I've talked about the shift we've seen in our country starting in the mid-90s of corporations focusing on maximizing shareholder value instead of maximizing stakeholder value, which is what most of our corporations were striving to do from the beginning of our country, at least until the modern era, until sometime in the mid-90s. But what's interesting is the embrace side of a biblically responsible mandate, or an ESG overall mandate, is they're trying to go after companies who look at all the stakeholders. And Eventide, one of our fund partners, made this graphic, and I think it's really important because we're striving to invest in companies that are focused on all of those areas, not just the shareholders. And what's neat about it is, when we did the initial research, is the BRI focused companies ended up having higher performance than a broad-based market index. And that's something that I think is encouraging, because that means the marketplace is rewarding these companies who put a focus on stakeholders way beyond just those who are only maximizing shareholder value. The other side of it that I think is really lost is the engagement aspect. Now, remember, collectively, these funds that we're using control a large number of shares. And the list up here on the screen shows the number of companies that, because of engagement from our BRI partners, have started a Christian employee group due to the shareholder activism. Now, obviously, it doesn't mean they all embrace biblical values. You can see a few up there on the screen that have actually been boycotted by Christian groups. But the key is, we're not going to be able to dictate Christian values. I've always told people, during elections, you shouldn't expect the president or Congress to reflect Christian values and enforce Christian values if the voters in general are not Christian. So the neat part of the Cornerstone portfolios and our fund partners is we're really flipping it around. It's a chance from the ground up, the grassroots level, to be engaging here. Now, all of these companies, if you're a Christian employee or even somebody who's a seeker, they now have a place where they can go, whether it's a weekly Bible study that are now being run at these companies, or just a online internal group that they have. You have a place as a Christian employee to go. And that's the only way God's kingdom is going to be impacted. It's not going to come from the top down, but really the bottoms up. And that's something that the Cornerstone models give us an opportunity to do. Now, finally, our motivation is obviously not profit driven. And in fact, these portfolios are on the cheapest end of all the SEM portfolios we have out there. But what I find exciting is the ability for all of us as advisors to differentiate ourselves from the rest of the market. I put up there some statistics from XY Planning Network, and I heard Michael Kitce speak at the Kingdom Advisors Conference last month, and he pointed this out as really, if we want to make our practice matter, if we want our business to grow, those who focus on a niche have had significantly higher revenue growth, and they've also converted their prospects a lot more. It also makes the marketing a lot easier because you become an expert in that field. So I would love to see a lot of you become experts in your community on biblically based investing. I mean, you think of the possibilities and the lives you can impact, and just the conversations I've had with clients and advisors over the last few months as we've launched these has been very encouraging, because there is a need. Remember, 80% of Christians out there want a biblical focus in their investments, and 77% have not had their advisor talk to them about it. So the Cornerstone models give you that chance to grow your business in really an underserved market. And if you're a Christian advisor, it gives you that opportunity to align your values with your business. And let me tell you, again, I'd love to talk to you offline about how these have completely changed my outlook for SEM, my excitement level, but just to be able to align my values to everything I do. Now it's 24/7. I have something, even when I'm at work, that I know I'm doing something to help further God's kingdom, and it comes across when you have meetings with clients. And I think it's neat for you guys to have that opportunity to do with that. So with that, I left 6 minutes, which is probably a record for me for questions. So Dustin, do we have any that have come in thus far?
We have a few here. The first one is, what is the cost?
Oh, good point. I brought it up, but I didn't say the number. It's 50 basis points, so same as AmeriGuard, significantly less than the dynamic or tactical models. And if you go back to that bubble chart I had, remember, we have Cornerstone Bond, which is going to be run the same as tactical bond, but now instead of paying 112 basis points, you get that for 50. Cornerstone Income is also 50 compared to dynamic income, which is 75 basis points.
All right, we have another one here. It says, who determines what is biblically responsible?
Yeah, I think that's one of the toughest things to do. And going into it, you have to realize, and this is always one of the things when people said, well, why don't you do biblically responsible? I said, well, how do you define that? And so we kind of are going, trusting our fund partners. We're talking to them. there's some clear things that the Bible says are sins, and we put those up on the screen. And what's interesting is, the broad ESG screens, they think pornography is bad. Well, God says pornography is bad. They think gambling is bad. God says gambling is bad. Abortion is definitely a sin, and so those things are key. But it comes down to the fund partners we have. There's all kinds of databases now. Inspire has a good one. Bloomberg even has some resources that they use, and they're literally going through things. I mentioned the Center for American Progress. They literally put on their website, hey, here's all of our donors, and it's easy for the people running the funds to go see. So it comes down to, the main things where the Bible, there's without question it's sin. Then you get into the gray areas. If you've ever studied in 1 Corinthians, when Paul talks about, is it okay to eat meat sacrificed for idols? Well, it really comes down to your heart. So it's something, if you want to talk about specifics with me, I'd love to offline, because I've learned a lot in the last 3 to 6 months about how this works.
All right, another one here is, what are the minimum investment amounts?
Oh, another good question. Like all of our other models, and especially AmeriGuard, we leave it up to the advisors. We don't want to be one to say, well, if somebody doesn't have $100,000, we don't want them as clients. We could get as low as $1,000 into a Cornerstone portfolio. We could even start people, if they're going to do, say, a monthly Roth contribution, start them with 50 or 200. Obviously, they couldn't get the whole portfolio, but if it makes sense for you as an advisor to work with the clients, we want to get them into a Cornerstone portfolio.
We got one more so far here. It says, should I switch current clients out of existing programs?
Well, that's a really good question. It's obviously case by case. If you have Christian clients, and everybody's going to be different, but I'll tell you, from my standpoint, Dustin's standpoint, and several of our employees here at SEM, when we discovered that Vanguard was one of the top donors to the Centers for American Progress, which supports pro-abortion legislation, we all made the conscious decision to take our AmeriGuard and swap it into Cornerstone. Same risk return profiles. You're not really giving up. The difference is, where are our fees going that we're paying these fund providers? The tactical bond versus Cornerstone bond, there's a little bit of trade-offs there. Obviously, you're not going to be as diversified. So it really comes down to client by client. But if you have strong Christian clients, I encourage you to talk to them about this, because I would much rather give my fees to biblically responsible fund families than somebody who is going against us. And I'm not saying you have to. Again, it comes down to a matter of conscience, of how you personally feel about it, how your clients feel about it. It's their personal choice on if they want to do it. But as I said, here at SEM, the Christian employees, which is nearly all of us, have made that decision to swap Cornerstone from our AmeriGuard investments.
It looks like that is it for questions.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for joining us. This recording will be made available if you missed it, or if you have any advisors in your office or assistants that wanted to hear it. We'll get that out to you as soon as we can. Also, this week, we are going to try to get a client-friendly version out on the website. Obviously, that depends on the market environment this week and how much trading we have to do. But we do appreciate all you have. If you want to talk about these more, you can send your support team an email, send your business development consultant, whether it's Garland, Tim, or Courtney, send them an email, and we'd love to talk to you about these further. So thank you, everybody, for joining us.